Tonight I'm going to talk about East Tennessee. The other day, while I was working, I had a conversation with a guy, and he could tell that I wasn't from where I was working at due to my accent. And had an interesting conversation, very interesting feller. But I figured in this video I would talk a little bit about East Tennessee because I've had a lot of people ask me about this area that I've came into contact with online. And I want to talk a little bit about the history and just how it is living here. But first, I've got this little, I guess you could say, montage of the places that I've been to here in East Tennessee. So enjoy, and I'll be back with you in a few.
Sometimes I don't know where this dirty road is taking me. Sometimes I don't know the reason why, so I guess I'll keep gambling, lots of moves and lots of rambling. Well, it's easier than just waiting around to die. Well, one time, friends, I had a mare. I even had a pie. He beat her with a belt once, cause she cried. She told him to take care of me. She headed down to Tennessee. Well, it's easier than just waiting around to die. Then I came of age and I found a girl in a Tuscaloosa bar. She cleaned me out and she hit it on the slide. Well, I tried to kill the pain. I bought some wine off the train. Well, it was easier than just waiting around to die. And a friend said he knew where some easy money was. We robbed a man and brother, did we fly. But the posse caught up with me and they dragged me back to Muscovy. And now it's 2 long years waiting around to die. Now I'm out of prison and I got me a friend at last. And he don't steal or cheat or drink or lie. Well, his name is Codeine and he's the nicest thing I've seen. And together we're gonna wait around to die.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about East Tennessee. I have been all over East Tennessee in my life. I was born in a town called Banner Elk, North Carolina. It's just right across the state line from where I was raised, where my family's from and everything in Tennessee. Banner Elk is just up the mountain a little ways from Boone, North Carolina. But I grew up, lived in Tennessee my entire life, other than there was a period of time there for several months back. It's been over a decade now. I think it's been about 12 years ago. I lived in Louisiana for several months. Town called Slidell. It's basically across the lake from New Orleans. I liked it down there. It was really nice. Did a lot of fishing in the bayou and in Lake Pontchartrain. But I mean, it's just too hot for me. It's just way too hot for me. And when I lived there, while I did appreciate the place, I missed home. I love these mountains. Let's see. Like I said, I was born and raised in the northeast corner of Tennessee in an extremely rural part, right on the Tennessee-North Carolina state line. The last almost 3 years, I've lived here just a little ways from the southeast corner of Tennessee. So I've been all over this area. To be honest, I've been to Middle Tennessee a handful of times. I've never made it to West Tennessee. And to be honest, from what I understand, Tennessee as a state, at least in my opinion, it's much better here in East Tennessee. There's beautiful parts of Middle Tennessee, certainly. West Tennessee, it flattens out. You know, you got the Mississippi River Valley. I'm sure there's some pretty places in West Tennessee, but this is one of those cases that, unlike Southwest and West Virginia, which are best Virginia, East Tennessee, I think, is best Tennessee. There are 33 counties in East Tennessee. All of them but 3 are in the Eastern time zone. The 3 that are in the Central time zone are Marion County, which is just the county west of where I live now. Bledsoe County, and I can't recall the third one. So what is the best I think about East Tennessee is the climate. Southeast Tennessee, where I live now, it gets pretty hot during the summers. Not as bad as it doesn't compare to how it is further south, I would imagine. It's nothing like the heat was when I lived in Louisiana. Here in Southeast Tennessee, we occasionally get snow. It seems like we may get 1 snow a year. It's usually not very much. I think last winter it snowed just a handful of times. It never amounted to anything more than 1 inch. The winter before last we got 1 snow that was about 4 inches. It doesn't snow down here very often. Northeast Tennessee, where I'm from, where my house back home sits and where my dad's place up above it, the elevation there is at about 25, 26, 2,700 feet. The elevation there is much higher. The winters up there, we get quite a bit of snow. I know just the town that I mentioned a second ago, Banner Elk, there's 2 ski resorts there. And I worked at those places back when I was in college during the winters. We get a lot of snow up there. The most snow that I'd ever seen in my lifetime back home, it was during the blizzard of '93. I was 6 years old, and in March, I just turned 6 years old. March of that year, we had a blizzard, and it dumped, there was 27 inches of snow in my front yard. The coldest that I have ever seen it in my lifetime up there was back in 2013. It got down to negative 13 or 14 one night. We have several days up there where it's around 0. pretty harsh up there, a lot harsher than it is here. Personally, I like the climate up there much better. The summers up there at that elevation, it rarely gets, very rarely ever gets above 85 degrees. As far as demographics go, East Tennessee is what we look for, you know. I believe all the counties, all of the 33 counties in East Tennessee, except for Hamilton, which is the county that Chattanooga is in, and Knox County, which is Knoxville. Those are the only two counties that are not at least 90% ethnically white, Native European. Especially up there where I'm from, the county there is, I believe it is 97.2% white. Now I'm sure that these numbers, this was going from the 2010 census, and we're all aware that our people have declined due to the information released from the 2020 census. So I don't know exactly what these numbers are now, but I would say largely still very white. To give you a little history of East Tennessee, the Cherokee was the tribes that inhabited this area shortly before the Europeans came here, and during the time that this nation was being built. The Cherokee, they came from the north. I'm not sure who the tribes were that inhabited the area before the Cherokee came down from the north, but the Cherokee, they were related to the Iroquois tribes, which were around Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. They sometime, I think around, I think it was around the 14 or 1500s, the Cherokee migrated southwards down to southern Appalachia. The oldest town in East Tennessee is Jonesboro. See, I'll go ahead and say this, there's three large, I guess you could say, metropolitan areas in East Tennessee. Up there where I'm from, it's the Tri-Cities, which is Bristol, Johnson City, and Kingsport. Further south and southwest is Knoxville, which is the largest city in East Tennessee. I think the population there is 183,000 or so. And then next is Chattanooga, which is here in southeast Tennessee. I think the population down here might be 160,000, 170, I can't recall exactly. The Tri-Cities, their combined population is, I think, around 120,000, which is spread out over two different counties. I grew up in the mountains away from the Tri-Cities. It took us about 35 minute drive to get to Johnson City, which is perfectly fine with me. Let's see. There's something else I was going to say. But to go back into the history, sorry to jump around, the oldest town is Jonesboro, which is in Washington County, Tennessee, the same county that Johnson City is in. It's the county next door to where I'm from. And the earliest settlers settled at Fort Watauga. Fort Watauga is in Elizabethton, Tennessee. It is the county seat of the county that I'm from. And they are the people who, during the American Revolution, the Over Mountain men who marched from Fort Watauga at Sycamore Shoals in Elizabeth, and they marched over. They marched up through the town that I was raised in. They went over the mountain, Roan Mountain, down into North Carolina. They marched all the way down to Kings Mountain, South Carolina, where they fought Major General Patrick Ferguson, I believe was his name, the English general. They had the Battle of Kings Mountain, and the Over Mountain men absolutely decimated. They destroyed the British Army down there. Now, looking at, I found during Madison Grant, his book Conquest of the Continent, finished reading a while back, I loved how he described the people who settled Appalachia and here in southern Appalachia. We are largely descended, white people from southern Appalachia, largely are descended from people that came over from northern England. They're descended from lowland Scotch, the Ulster Scots. You know, they call them Scotch-Irish. That's kind of a misnomer because by and large they were purely Scottish. They just happened to stay over in the Ulster, the northern region of Ireland, due to Protestantism, due to their Protestant faith. They didn't mix with the native Irish population except, I'd say, in very extremely rare cases. These Ulster Scots, which my ancestry is largely English, these northern English people. I've got some Ulster Scot, and there is a bit of Danish ancestry that I have on my father's side. But largely it is Ulster Scot and English. Now, he describes the people that settled this area first, these frontiersmen, these southwestern frontiersmen, as he called them. He said basically they were largely a lawless people. They were addicted to violence and killings, in his own words. And this is due to the fact that a lot of the people from northern England and the lowland Scotch who came over here had fought with each other for centuries. They were addicted to violence because there was this, this huge conflict, like I said, for centuries on the border of England and Scotland, and that is largely who settled this area in East Tennessee. There's also a mixture of Alpine Germans, people that came over from Germany to escape, I guess you could say, religious persecution. These same people are, there are Amish and Mennonite communities. There's actually a Mennonite community just probably 30-40 minutes from here. I've never been to it myself. I'd like to go see it someday, perhaps. I don't know if they'd allow us over there, but still very interesting. So largely, the people here are of English and Ulster Scot descent. There are some Germans. Actually, in the town that I'm from, there's a fair amount of people with they have German surnames. One of my best friends growing up had a German surname. I wouldn't say he was an Alpine German. He's tall, blonde-headed, blue-eyed. His ancestors, I would assume, came from northern Germany. Let's see, going back into the history. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting how Madison Grant described the people who settled here in Appalachia, southern Appalachia. They migrated. A lot of them came in through the port of Philadelphia. They came over to western Pennsylvania, and over time, a lot of them just migrated southwestwards, down the ridge and valley portion of the Appalachians. You see, where I was born and where I was raised is part of the Blue Ridge region of Appalachia. Right now, I live in the Tennessee River Valley. Down here, it's Ridge and Valley. If you go a little further west, you have the beginnings of the Cumberland Plateau. Now, let's see. During the Civil War, East Tennessee, although it was part of Tennessee, and Tennessee voted to secede from the Union, East Tennessee almost went the route that West Virginia did. West Virginia broke off from Virginia to stay in the Union. This same thing almost happened here in East Tennessee. In fact, this guy here, his tombstone, this would be my great-grandfather's uncle. And he served. He fought in the Civil War for the Union. He rode with the 13th Cavalry Regiment of Tennessee. It goes to show just how divided Tennessee was. They were based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. He enlisted when he would have been 41 years old when he enlisted. See, East Tennessee wanted to stay in the Union because there was hardly anyone in this area that had any slaves. There's hardly any, really, to be honest, other than, like I said earlier, other than Hamilton or Knox counties, which is Chattanooga and Knoxville, there's hardly any black people in East Tennessee. There's not really many Mexicans at all either, although I'm sure that over the last decade, due to the crisis at the border and all that bullshit, we're going to see more and more, you know. It's funny too, this is kind of, don't mean to get too far off track, but where I was raised and where I grew up and lived until a few years ago in Tennessee, you hardly seen any Mexicans. The town that I'm from, if you could even call it a town, it's more like a village, 99% white. But if you go just across the state line into North Carolina, you see a significantly larger number of Mexicans because there's a lot more work over there. In fact, when I worked at the ski resorts, like I said earlier, a lot of the crew that I worked with were Mexicans, you know. I could speak a little Spanish, you know, not much, but enough to get by. And usually there was a few of them that could speak English. I always thought that was really strange in a way, because just how the state line was kept that little demographic. It was sort of a dividing line in a way, which I'm saying there was a few Mexicans in the town that I'm from, but a lot more just across the state line. See, North Carolina, western North Carolina, there's a lot more tourism over there. And there's a lot more, like I said, those ski resorts. We don't have any up there in northeast Tennessee. There's a lot more work up there. And a lot of times when I was growing up, I ended up working in North Carolina, just across the state line. Going back to the Civil War, every county in the state, in East Tennessee, except for 31 out of the 33 counties voted to stay in the Union during the referendum. The only 2 counties who voted to secede with the rest of the state of Tennessee was Meigs County, which is just due north of where I live right now, and also Sullivan County, which is northwest of the county that I'm from. It's the county that Kingsport and Bristol are in. These 2 counties voted to secede, but every other county voted to stay with the Union. Now, say we fast forward several decades, you have the foundation of the TVA. Roosevelt, FDR, pushed that through in order to sort of modernize East Tennessee. I have mixed feelings about that. I despise FDR. He was a trash president. But the TVA, it modernized and industrialized parts of East Tennessee. One thing I do appreciate about the TVA system is the formation of all these lakes. Chickamauga Lake, just a couple miles from where I live right now. All the way up to Watauga Lake, where I was raised. South Holston Lake. You go over into western North Carolina, you have Hiwassee Lake, Lake Fontana, all these. Damming up, you know, the first ever successful uranium enrichment project was at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So yeah, it was all this this project to industrialize East Tennessee and power production through hydroelectric dams. Let's see. Yeah, that's just a bit about the history of East Tennessee. Also, East Tennessee is where it is said that it's the place, the birthplace of country music, due to the Victor recordings up in Bristol, Tennessee, back in 1927. You know, and East Tennessee is also culturally distinct from Middle and especially West Tennessee. Bluegrass music, like I said, it's culturally different here. We had a lot of moonshining going on. Actually, my grandfather on my mother's side showed me his moonshine still he had back when I was around 12 years old. He made it. You know, people here have a huge distrust of authority. We don't like authority here. Never have. and I hope we never will, although I'm afraid that due to the media and all the bullshit that they spout, run off the mouth about, you know. And also, I have to say, I hate saying this, but you see a lot of the globo homo propaganda seeping into even rural areas like where I'm from. This area is a beautiful area. All of East Tennessee is a beautiful area, save for cities, you know, the larger urban areas, which actually, you know, I have to say Chattanooga and Knoxville, I don't like cities, but they are pretty. They have the Tennessee River flowing through them. Kingsport, Bristol, and Johnson City, they're pretty because they're up in a more rugged part of Tennessee. But, you know, overall I don't like cities. And sadly we see the globo homo propaganda infecting this rural area. It's all across southern Appalachia, you know. As far as religion goes, most everyone here is some form of Protestant Christian. Myself, I was raised Presbyterian. It's largely Presbyterian, Methodist, or some denomination of Baptist, you know. Those are the three biggest denominations, I guess you could say. Now, let's see. As far as some of the cons of this area is that, you know, really unless you live close to perhaps the Tri-Cities, Knoxville, or Chattanooga, work can be kind of hard to find. Actually, a few years ago when we moved down here, it was because Miranda got a job, a really good job, and personally, I needed to get off drugs. And that's another one of the biggest drawbacks of this area. Like I said earlier, we have our bug men, unfortunately, here in southern Appalachia. I mean, they're around. Even in the rural town that I'm from, you know, they're around, unfortunately. The other bad thing is, you know, the drug epidemic, you know, the opiate epidemic affects the state of West Virginia. It's rural Appalachia, you know. Back during, throughout the 2000s, up till today, you know, there was the opiate epidemic, prescription pain pills. You know, I've had my troubles with that back years ago. This is all by design. I fully believe this. You know, it's just part of the Great Replacement. Absolutely. It's undeniable because you look at the demographic of the people who are most affected by the opiate epidemic, they're white. And especially here, southern Appalachia, central Appalachia, West Virginia, western Pennsylvania, Ohio, eastern Kentucky, East Tennessee, West North Carolina, North Georgia. It's astonishing at how bad and how much of a scourge this fucking shit has been. Peddled by the Sacklers, you know, they got the Oxycontin, started back, I think, in 1996. And now it's, the laws have been tightened, and it's harder for a person to get prescription pain pills. A lot of times, you know, I had cousins back home who would go down to Florida, doctor shop, you know, they'd bring back hundreds of pills. And they tightened up years ago, they cut that out. And you know, now you see heroin flowing in, and especially another, even possibly much more destructive thing is the methamphetamine, which a lot of it comes from Mexico. It's brought in by cartels and distributed. You know, that was my big thing there, you know, there for a few years was meth. And it's tragic. You know, I'm very lucky to have gotten away from it. And it's a very tragic thing to see. You know, it's heartbreaking a lot of times. What it does, how it tears all these families apart, how it ruins lives. It's an absolute disaster, and this is all by fucking design, by the people that rule over us. We all know this. But overall, I love East Tennessee, and I wouldn't live anywhere else in America. I would consider possibly, you know, the Pacific Northwest, There's some beautiful places up there. I'm not much for the Midwest. I love mountains. And honestly, this is the only place I want to live, East Tennessee, Southern Appalachia. I consider the Pacific Northwest, like I said. Other than that, I'd perhaps be interested if I was ever to have to leave America for some reason. Perhaps, Norway, Sweden. Although I would probably mark Sweden off the list due to the demographic replacement that's currently going on there. The Balkans looks like a very interesting place. Looks like a very beautiful place. I've talked to some friends who live over there. That's an interesting place. Or perhaps, northern England, Scotland, up in the Highlands. But I think it's important, I think it's the best for our people to live in a place that is that resembles our native habitat overall. Unfortunately, Tennessee, and I would imagine East Tennessee, is one of the rapidly, it's one of the places in this country that people are currently moving to. There's a lot of people from California that are coming over here. Some of them are alright. Some of them I'd like to tell to fuck right back. Go the fuck back where you came from. We don't want you here. You can go and suffer in your shitty ass state. You can suffer there for all the things that you voted for and wish for. But, like I said, there are some that are coming here, and if I can understand people, like back home, one of my dad's best friends, he's around my age, Bridger, if you're watching this, you're one of the good ones, and people that are like you, much more than welcome here. But it's frightening to me what's probably going to happen during my lifetime, I've heard tell that Biden is bussing in, flying in all these migrants that are pouring over up from Central America, I would say during my lifetime we're going to witness the decline. And I would imagine that unfortunately that this area will be targeted by these people that rule over us. And that's a fucking shame. Unless there is something big that happens. We can always keep our fingers crossed. I don't know. But anyway, I figured I would make this video to explain a little bit about East Tennessee. It's a beautiful place. It's a poor place, but it's beautiful. And to be honest, I wouldn't live anywhere else. Thank y'all for watching. Bye-bye.